The rain came down in sheets, hammering the windshield of my beat-up Honda as I pulled into the driveway of the Carter house. My heart was a drum in my chest, each beat louder than the last, because I knew who was waiting inside. Ethan Carter, my best friend's older brother, had a way of turning my world upside down with a single look. I was 19, a college freshman still figuring out who I was, and Ethan was 25, a firefighter with a jawline that could cut glass and a smile that made my knees weak. I'd known him since I was a kid, tagging along with his younger brother, Jake, to video game marathons and backyard barbecues. But this summer, something had shifted. Ethan's glances lingered too long, his casual touches, brushing my shoulder, nudging my arm, felt like sparks. And now, Jake was away at a music festival, but Ethan had texted me an hour ago, "Storm's bad. Crash here tonight." No arguments. I grabbed my backpack and bolted through the rain, reaching the porch just as the door swung open. Ethan stood there, all 6'2" of him, in a fitted gray t-shirt and jeans, his dark hair damp from a recent shower. "Took you long enough, Riley," he said, his voice low and teasing, but his eyes held something heavier, something that made my breath catch. "Blame the weather," I muttered, stepping inside, my sneakers squeaking on the hardwood. The house smelled like cedar and coffee, warm and familiar. I dropped my bag by the couch, trying to ignore the way Ethan's gaze followed me, steady and unreadable. "You're soaked," he said, tossing me a towel from the hall closet. "Go change. I'll grab you something dry." I hesitated, my stomach twisting. Staying over at the Carter house wasn't new. Jake and I had sleepovers here all through high school, but this was different. Jake wasn't here. It was just me and Ethan, alone in a house that suddenly felt too small, too charged. I nodded and headed to the bathroom, my mind racing. What was I doing here? Why had I said yes so fast? In the bathroom, I peeled off my wet shirt and caught my reflection in the mirror. Scrawny, pale, with messy black hair and eyes that looked too big for my face. Nothing like Ethan, who was all muscle and confidence, the kind of guy who could walk into a room and own it. I wasn't even sure why he kept me around, why he texted me out of the blue or invited me to stay over when Jake was gone. But every time he did, I came running. When I stepped back into the living room, Ethan was sprawled on the couch, a beer in one hand, another on the coffee table for me. He'd changed into a black tank top that showed off his arms, and I had to look away before my brain short-circuited. "You good?" he asked, his voice softer now, like he could see right through me. "Yeah," I lied, sitting on the opposite end of the couch, clutching the towel like a lifeline. The TV was on, some action movie with explosions, but neither of us was watching. The silence between us was heavy, filled with things we weren't saying. "You didn't have to come, you know," Ethan said suddenly, his eyes fixed on the screen. "I mean, I know you've got your own place now. College life, right?" I swallowed, my throat dry. "It's just a dorm, and I didn't mind." Understatement of the century. I took a sip of the beer, hoping it would calm my nerves, but it only made me hyper-aware of how close he was, the heat of his presence pulling me in like gravity. He turned to look at me then, his brown eyes intense, searching. "You sure about that, Riley? You look like you're about to bolt." I laughed, but it came out shaky. "I'm fine, just not used to this. You and me, no Jake. Feels weird." "Does it?" He leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees, the movement bringing him closer. "Or does it feel right?" My heart stopped. The room seemed to shrink, the air thick with the weight of his words. I opened my mouth to respond, but nothing came out. Ethan's gaze didn't waver, and for the first time, I saw something raw in his expression, vulnerability, maybe, or need. It was gone in a flash, replaced by his usual cocky grin, but it was enough to make my pulse race. "Relax, kid," he said, leaning back, breaking the moment. "I'm not gonna bite. Not unless you ask." I rolled my eyes, trying to play it cool, but my face was burning. "You're such a jerk," I muttered, and he laughed, the sound warm and easy, like nothing had happened. But something had. I could feel it, like a current running beneath the surface, waiting to pull us under. We spent the next hour pretending everything was normal, talking about nothing, work, school, the storm outside. But every time his arm brushed mine or his laugh filled the room, I felt it again. That pull, that spark. By the time he suggested we head upstairs, my nerves were shot. "You can take Jake's room," he said, leading the way. Or he paused at the top of the stairs, turning to face me, his voice dropping low. "You could crash with me. Storm's loud. Might help you sleep." I stared at him, my mind blank, my heart pounding so hard I was sure he could hear it. "With you?" I managed, my voice barely above a whisper. He shrugged, but his eyes were locked on mine, intense and unyielding. "Yeah, Riley. With me." I didn't know what to say. I didn't know what I wanted. Or maybe I did, and that was the problem. All I knew was that I was standing on the edge of something, and Ethan Carter was daring me to jump. I stood frozen at the top of the stairs, Ethan's words hanging in the air like a challenge. The hallway was dim, lit only by a single lamp on a side table, casting long shadows across the hardwood. My mouth was dry, and my backpack felt heavier than it should, like it was anchoring me to the spot. "Chill, Riley," Ethan said, his voice softer now, almost gentle. He stepped closer, close enough that I could smell the faint cedar of his cologne, feel the warmth radiating off him. "It's just a bed. You don't have to make it weird." But it was weird. Everything about this moment, the storm rattling the windows, the empty house, the way his eyes seemed to see straight through me, was electric, dangerous. I nodded, not trusting my voice, and followed him down the hall to his room. Ethan's bedroom was exactly what I'd expected. Minimal, masculine, with a king-sized bed covered in navy sheets, a firefighter's helmet on a shelf, and a stack of books on the nightstand. A window overlooked the backyard, where rain lashed the trees, and the faint glow of streetlights bled through the glass. He tossed a spare pillow onto the bed and gestured vaguely. "You take the left. I don't hog covers, promise." I laughed, more out of nerves than anything, and dropped my backpack by the door. This is not how I saw tonight going, I admitted, sitting on the edge of the bed, my hands clasped tightly in my lap. Ethan raised an eyebrow, kicking off his shoes. "Oh yeah? How'd you see it going?" He climbed onto the other side of the bed, stretching out like it was the most normal thing in the world, like having me here wasn't setting every nerve in his body on edge the way it was mine. "I don't know," I said, my voice quieter than I meant it to be. "Thought we'd just watch a movie, crash on the couch. Like old times." He turned his head to look at me, his expression unreadable. "Old times, huh? You and Jake playing video games while I pretended not to notice you staring at me." My face went hot, and I looked away, focusing on the rain streaking the window. "I didn't stare," I muttered, but it was a weak lie, and we both knew it. I'd always noticed Ethan, his laugh, his easy confidence, the way he carried himself like nothing could touch him. But I'd never thought he noticed me back. Not like this. "Relax, I'm messing with you," he said, but his tone was too soft, too serious. He sat up, leaning on one elbow, his gaze steady. "You've always been different, Riley. Quiet, but not weak. You've got this fire in you, even if you don't see it." I didn't know what to say to that. No one had ever called me anything like that before. Scrawny, awkward Riley Nguyen, the kid who blended into the background, had fire? It sounded like a joke, but Ethan's eyes were dead serious, and the way he was looking at me made my chest ache. "Ethan, I started, but the words caught in my throat. What was I supposed to say? That I'd had a crush on him since I was 15? That every time he texted me, my heart did stupid flips? That I was terrified of whatever this was because I didn't know if I could handle it? He reached out, his hand brushing mine, just for a second, but it was enough to send a jolt through me. "You don't have to say anything," he said quietly. "Just stay?" "Okay." I nodded, my throat tight, and lay down on my side of the bed, staring at the ceiling. The mattress dipped under Ethan's weight as he settled in, close enough that I could feel the heat of him, far enough that it felt like a canyon between us. The storm roared outside, but inside, it was quiet, too quiet, and my mind was screaming. I don't know how long we lay there, the seconds stretching into minutes, the tension building like a storm of its own. Then Ethan spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. "You ever feel like you're running from something, but you don't know what?" I turned my head, surprised to see him staring at the ceiling too, his jaw tight. "Yeah," I said, my voice hoarse. All the time. He looked at me then, and for a moment, I saw it again. That raw, unguarded look in his eyes, like he was letting me see something he didn't show anyone else. I've been running a long time, Riley, he said, but I'm tired of it. My heart pounded, and I wanted to ask what he meant, but before I could, he rolled onto his side, facing me. Get some sleep, he said, but his hand reached out, resting lightly on my arm, and he didn't move it. I didn't sleep. Not really. The weight of his hand, the sound of his breathing, the storm outside. It all kept me awake, my mind spinning with questions I was too scared to ask. What was this? What did he want? And why did I want it so badly? By the time the first light of dawn crept through the window, I was still staring at the ceiling, Ethan's hand still on my arm, and I knew nothing would ever be the same. Morning came too fast, the storm fading to a soft drizzle, the world outside Ethan's window gray and quiet. I hadn't slept more than a few restless minutes, hyper-aware of his presence beside me, his hand still resting on my arm until he'd rolled over in his sleep. Now he was sprawled across the bed, one arm flung over his head, his chest rising and falling with slow, steady breaths. He looked peaceful, younger somehow, and I couldn't stop staring. I slipped out of bed as quietly as I could, my bare feet cold against the hardwood. My backpack was still by the door, and I grabbed it, intending to sneak downstairs and figure out how to face the day. But as I reached the hallway, Ethan's voice stopped me. Running already? I turned, my heart jumping. He was sitting up, rubbing his eyes, his hair a mess. Just needed some air, I said, which was a terrible lie, and his smirk told me he knew it. Air, huh? You sure you're not trying to escape me? He stood, stretching, his tank top riding up just enough to show a sliver of tanned skin. I looked away, my face burning. I'm not escaping, I said, gripping my backpack strap like it could save me. Just didn't want to wake you. He stepped closer, his expression softening. You didn't. I'm a light sleeper. Comes with the job. He paused, studying me. You okay, Riley? You look like you're about to jump out of your skin. I forced a laugh, but it sounded hollow. I'm fine. Just not used to this. I gestured vaguely at the room, at him, at everything. You know, sharing a bed with my best friend's brother. He grinned, but there was something serious behind it. Yeah, well, I'm not used to it either. But I meant what I said last night. I'm glad you stayed. My stomach flipped, and I didn't know what to say. Before I could figure it out, he brushed past me, his shoulder grazing mine, and headed downstairs. Come on, he called over his shoulder. I make a mean pancake. Breakfast was surreal. Ethan moved around the kitchen with the same confidence he had everywhere else, flipping pancakes with a flourish while I sat at the counter, nursing a coffee and trying to act normal. But nothing about this was normal. Every time he looked at me, every time he smiled, I felt like I was unraveling. So, he said, sliding a plate of pancakes in front of me. What's the plan for today? You got class, or are you sticking around? I stared at the pancakes, golden and perfect, like he'd done this a million times. No class. It's Saturday, but I should probably head back to the dorm. Got stuff to do. Stuff, he repeated, leaning against the counter, his arms crossed. Real specific, Riley. You always this mysterious. I rolled my eyes, but my heart wasn't in it. I'm not mysterious. I'm boring. You know that. He laughed, a deep, warm sound that made my chest ache. Boring? Nah. You're a lot of things, but boring's not one of them. He paused, his eyes locking onto mine. You're complicated. In a good way. I didn't know how to respond to that, so I shoved a bite of pancake in my mouth, hoping it would hide the fact that my face was probably bright red. Ethan watched me, his expression unreadable, and for a moment, I thought he was going to say something else, something big. But then his phone buzzed, and he glanced at it, his jaw tightening. Work, he said, his voice clipped. They need me at the station. Some flooding from the storm. He looked at me, almost apologetic. You good to hang out here for a bit? I'll be back by lunch. Yeah, sure, I said, trying to sound casual, but my mind was racing. Was I supposed to just stay here? In his house? Alone? He grabbed his jacket and keys, then paused at the door. Riley, he said, his voice low. Don't overthink this, okay? Just be here when I get back. I nodded, my throat tight, and then he was gone, the door clicking shut behind him. The house felt too big without him, too quiet, and I wandered back upstairs, trying to shake the feeling that I was in over my head. I ended up in his room again, sitting on the bed, staring at the books on his nightstand. One was a worn copy of The Great Gatsby, which surprised me. Ethan didn't seem like the literary type. I flipped it open, and a photo slipped out, falling to the floor. It was Ethan and Jake, years ago, grinning at the camera, their arms around each other. But there was another figure in the background, blurry but unmistakable. Me, maybe 15, skinny and awkward, watching them with a look I couldn't quite read. I stared at the photo, my chest tight. Had Ethan kept this here on purpose? Did it mean something? Or was I just seeing what I wanted to see? By the time he got back, I was a mess of nerves, pacing the living room. He walked in, his hair damp from the rain, his firefighter jacket slung over one shoulder. "Miss me?" he teased, but his eyes were searching, like he was checking to see if I'd bolted. "Maybe," I said, surprising myself with the honesty. His smile widened, and for the first time, I let myself wonder if maybe, just maybe, he felt the same pull I did. Ethan dropped his jacket on the couch and ran a hand through his wet hair, his eyes never leaving mine. The air between us was charged, like the moment before a lightning strike. I wanted to say something, anything, to break the tension, but my words were stuck, tangled up in the mess of feelings I couldn't name. "You stayed," he said, his voice softer than I expected, almost surprised. He stepped closer, and I could smell the rain on him, mixed with something warmer, something uniquely Ethan. "Told you I would," I said, trying to keep my voice steady, but it cracked on the last word. I clutched the photo I'd found, still in my hand, and his eyes flicked to it, narrowing slightly. "Where'd you get that?" he asked, not accusing, just curious. He took a step closer, close enough that I could see the faint stubble on his jaw, the way his eyes softened when he looked at the photo. "Your book," I admitted, holding it out. It fell out. I wasn't snooping or anything. He took the photo, his fingers brushing mine, and I swear my heart stopped for a second. He studied it, a small smile tugging at his lips. "God, we were kids," he said, his voice low. "Jake was, what, 13? And you?" He looked at me, his expression shifting. "You were always there, weren't you? Always watching." My face burned, and I looked down, wishing I could disappear. "I wasn't watching," I muttered, but it was a lie, and we both knew it. I'd always been drawn to Ethan, even when I was too young to understand why. He set the photo on the coffee table, his movements slow, deliberate. "You don't have to be embarrassed, Riley," he said, his voice gentle but firm. "I noticed you too." My head snapped up, my breath catching. "What?" He laughed, but it was soft, almost nervous. "Come on, you think I didn't see you? All those summers, you and Jake running around, and you'd get all quiet whenever I was around. I thought it was cute." "Cute," I repeated, my voice flat, but my heart was racing. Cute wasn't what I wanted to be to Ethan Carter. Not then, not now. He stepped closer, close enough that I could feel the heat of him, and my back hit the wall before I realized I'd been moving. "Not just cute," he said, his voice dropping low, his eyes locked on mine. "You were real. Different. You still are." I didn't know what to say, didn't know how to process the way he was looking at me, like I was the only thing in the room, the only thing that mattered. My hands were shaking, and I shoved them in my pockets, trying to play it cool. "Ethan, I don't know what you're doing." He tilted his head, a faint smile playing on his lips. "I'm not doing anything, Riley. Just being honest. Maybe for the first time." My chest ached, a mix of hope and fear and something I couldn't name. "Honest about what?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. He didn't answer right away. Instead, he reached out, his hand grazing my cheek, his thumb brushing the corner of my mouth. It was such a small touch, but it set every nerve in my body on fire. "Honest about you," he said finally. "About how I've been thinking about you way more than I should." I stared at him, my mind blank, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might burst. This was Ethan, Jake's brother, the guy I'd idolized for years, the guy who was so far out of my league it wasn't even funny. And he was standing here, touching me, saying things I'd only dreamed of. "Ethan, I started, but my voice broke, and I looked away, my face burning. I'm not like you. I'm just me. He laughed, a low, warm sound that made my stomach flip. That's the point, Riley. You're you. And I like you. The words hit me like a punch, stealing my breath. I wanted to believe him, wanted it so badly it hurt, but doubt crept in, cold and sharp. Why? I asked, my voice small. Why me? He didn't hesitate. Because you're brave, even if you don't think you are. Because you're kind, and you don't even try to be. Because every time you're around, I can't stop looking at you. I didn't know what to say, didn't know how to handle the weight of his words, the intensity of his gaze. So I did the only thing I could think of. I leaned forward, closing the distance between us, and kissed him. It was clumsy, desperate, my hands fumbling for his shoulders, but Ethan didn't pull away. He kissed me back, hard and hungry, his hands finding my waist, pulling me closer. The world fell away, the storm outside, the house, everything. There was only him, only this. When we finally broke apart, both of us breathing hard, he rested his forehead against mine, his eyes closed. Damn, Riley, he whispered. You're gonna ruin me. I laughed, shaky and breathless, and for the first time, I felt like maybe I could be enough. The kiss lingered in the air between us, a moment so raw and real it felt like the world had shifted on its axis. Ethan's hands were still on my waist, his thumbs brushing slow circles against my skin, and I was dizzy, my head spinning with the weight of what we'd just done. I'd kissed Ethan Carter, and he'd kissed me back. We shouldn't have done that, I said, my voice shaky, but I didn't move away. I couldn't. His forehead was still pressed against mine, his breath warm against my lips, and every part of me wanted to stay right there, in that moment, forever. Why not? Ethan asked, his voice low, almost a growl. He pulled back just enough to look at me, his brown eyes dark and intense. You're telling me you didn't want that? I swallowed, my throat tight. I did, but you're Jake's brother. And I trailed off, not sure how to finish. I'm what? A nobody? A kid with a crush? Someone who had no business thinking he could have someone like Ethan? He cupped my face in his hands, forcing me to meet his gaze. You're Riley, he said, like it was the simplest thing in the world. And I've wanted to do that for a long time. Jake's got nothing to do with this. My heart stuttered, and I wanted to believe him, but fear clawed at me. He's my best friend, Ethan. If he finds out if he hates me. Ethan's jaw tightened, and for a moment, I thought he was angry, but then he sighed, his shoulders slumping. Jake's not gonna hate you, he said. He might be pissed at me, but he'll get over it. He's family. And he paused, searching for the right word. You're important, Riley. To both of us. I didn't know what to say to that, so I just stood there, my hands still on his shoulders, my mind a mess of hope and doubt. Ethan leaned in again, slower this time, and kissed me softly, like he was giving me a chance to pull away. I didn't. I couldn't. It was like he was a magnet, and I was helpless against the pull. When we broke apart, he smiled, a real smile, not his usual cocky grin. Come on, he said, stepping back, but keeping one hand on my arm, like he was afraid I'd disappear. Let's eat. I'm starving. We ended up back in the kitchen, heating up leftovers from breakfast, the tension between us easing but not gone. Every glance, every accidental brush of his hand against mine, sent sparks through me. We talked about nothing, movies, music, the time he and Jake set off fireworks in the backyard and nearly burned down the shed, but it felt different now, like we were building something new. After lunch, Ethan suggested we go for a walk, despite the drizzle still falling outside. Fresh air, he said, tossing me one of his hoodies. It was too big, the sleeves hanging past my hands, but it smelled like him, and I didn't want to take it off. We walked through the neighborhood, the streets quiet except for the occasional car splashing through puddles. Ethan was easy to talk to, always had been, but now there was an undercurrent to every word, every laugh. I told him about college, about my art classes, and how I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do with my life. He told me about the fire station, about the calls that kept him up at night, the ones that made him question everything. You ever think about quitting? I asked, kicking a pebble down the sidewalk. He shrugged, his hands in his pockets. Sometimes. It's heavy, seeing people at their worst. But then you save someone, and it's everything. He looked at me, his eyes soft. Kinda like you. I laughed, shoving his shoulder. Shut up. I'm not saving anyone. You sure about that? He said, his voice quiet, and I felt my face heat up again. We ended up at a small park, the swings creaking in the wind. Ethan sat on one, his long legs stretched out, and I took the one next to him, our knees brushing. The rain had stopped, and the air was cool, fresh, like the world was starting over. Riley, he said after a long silence, his voice serious. I need you to know something. I'm not good at this. Relationships, feelings, whatever. I've messed up before, but I want to try. With you. My heart stopped, and I stared at him, the swing still beneath me. You're serious, I said, more a statement than a question. Dead serious, he said, and the look in his eyes told me he meant it. I didn't know what to say, didn't know how to tell him that I was terrified and thrilled and everything in between. So I reached for his hand, lacing my fingers through his, and squeezed. It wasn't an answer, not really, but it was enough for now. The walk back to the house was quiet, our hands still linked, the weight of Ethan's words settling over me like a warm blanket. I'd never felt this before, this mix of fear and hope, like I was standing on the edge of something huge and beautiful and terrifying. Ethan didn't push me to talk, didn't fill the silence with his usual jokes, and I was grateful for it. He was giving me space, but his hand in mine was a reminder that he wasn't going anywhere. Back at the house, the afternoon stretched out, lazy and warm despite the gray sky. We ended up on the couch, a movie playing in the background, but neither of us was really watching. Ethan's arm was around my shoulders, his fingers tracing idle patterns on my sleeve, and I was hyper-aware of every point of contact, every breath he took. You're thinking too much, he said suddenly, his voice low, teasing. He tilted his head to look at me, his eyes glinting with mischief. I can practically hear it. I laughed, but it was shaky. Can you blame me? This is a lot. He nodded, his expression softening. I know, but it's not a bad kind of a lot, right? No, I admitted, my voice barely above a whisper. It's not bad. He smiled, and then he was kissing me again, slow and deliberate, like he was memorizing every second of it. I melted into him, my hands finding his chest, feeling the steady beat of his heart under my fingers. It was overwhelming, the way he made me feel, like I was enough, like I was wanted, like I could be more than I'd ever thought possible. When we pulled apart, I was breathless, my head spinning. Ethan, I said, my voice hoarse, what are we doing? He rested his forehead against mine, his hands cupping my face. We're figuring it out, he said. Together. The rest of the day passed in a blur of small moments, laughing over burnt popcorn, arguing about which movie to watch next, stealing glances when we thought the other wasn't looking. But as evening fell, the reality of what was happening started to sink in. Jake would be back tomorrow. The world outside this house would come crashing in, and I didn't know if I was ready for it. Ethan seemed to sense my mood, because he pulled me closer, his arm tightening around me. Hey, he said, his voice soft. Whatever you're worrying about, we'll deal with it. Okay. I nodded, but doubt gnawed at me. What if Jake didn't understand? What if this, whatever this was, fell apart? What if Ethan changed his mind? As if he could read my thoughts, he tilted my chin up, forcing me to meet his gaze. I'm not going anywhere, Riley, he said, his voice firm. I mean it. I wanted to believe him, but fear was a stubborn thing, and it clung to me as we headed upstairs that night. Ethan didn't ask if I wanted to share his bed again. He just held out his hand, and I took it, following him into his room like it was the most natural thing in the world. This time, there was no awkward distance between us. He pulled me close, my back against his chest, his arm draped over my waist. His breath was warm against my neck, and I could feel his heartbeat, steady and strong, lulling me into a calm I hadn't felt in years. You're shaking, he murmured, his lips brushing my ear. I am not. I lied, but my voice betrayed me, and he chuckled, the sound vibrating through me. It's okay, he said, his voice soft, serious. I've got you. And for the first time, I believed him. I closed my eyes, letting myself sink into the warmth of him, the safety of him, And for a moment, I let myself forget about the world outside, about Jake, about everything but the man holding me like I was something precious. When I woke up, it was still dark, the room quiet except for the soft sound of Ethan's breathing. I turned in his arms, studying his face in the dim light. He looked peaceful, unguarded, and my chest ached with how much I wanted him. But then I heard it, the sound of the front door opening downstairs, the familiar thud of Jake's boots on the hardwood. My heart stopped, and I froze, panic flooding me. Jake was back early, and I was in his brother's bed. I slipped out of Ethan's arms, my heart hammering as I grabbed my shoes and crept to the door. The house was dark, the only light coming from the faint glow of the kitchen downstairs. Jake's voice echoed up, muffled but unmistakable, calling out for Ethan. I glanced back at the bed, where Ethan was stirring, his eyes blinking open. "Riley," he whispered, his voice thick with sleep. "What's—" "Jake's here," I hissed, panic clawing at my chest. "He's back early." Ethan sat up, instantly alert, his expression shifting from confusion to determination. "Okay, stay calm," he said, swinging his legs over the side of the bed. "I'll handle it." But I was already moving, my shoes in one hand, my heart in my throat. "Handle it? Ethan, he's gonna see me here, in your room, and—" He grabbed my wrist, pulling me back gently but firmly. "Riley, breathe. We're not doing anything wrong." I stared at him, my eyes wide. "Not doing anything wrong? I'm in your bed, Ethan. He's my best friend, and you're his brother, and I care about you," he said, his voice low, steady. "We'll figure this out. Together." Before I could argue, he was out of bed, pulling on a shirt and heading downstairs. I followed, my stomach twisting, every step feeling like a march to my doom. Jake was in the kitchen, rummaging through the fridge, his back to us. He turned when he heard us, his face lighting up with a grin. "Yo, Riley, you're here?" he said, then glanced at Ethan, his grin faltering. "Wait, what's going on? You guys look weird." Ethan leaned against the counter, casual as ever, but I could see the tension in his shoulders. "Storm kept him here last night," he said, his voice even. "You know how Riley's car is with rain." Jake raised an eyebrow, looking between us. "Okay, but why do you both look like you just robbed a bank?" I laughed, but it came out choked, and Ethan shot me a look that said calm down. "No bank robbing," he said. "Just didn't sleep much. You're back early." "Yeah, festival got rained out," Jake said, grabbing a soda from the fridge. "Figured I'd crash here instead of driving back to campus." He paused, his eyes narrowing. "Seriously, though, what's up with you two?" My mouth went dry, and I opened it to say something. Anything, but Ethan beat me to it. "Jake, we need to talk," he said, his voice steady but serious. "About me and Riley." My heart stopped, and I stared at him, my mind screaming, "What are you doing?" Jake froze, the soda halfway to his mouth, his eyes flicking between us. "You and Riley?" he repeated, his voice flat. Ethan didn't flinch. "Yeah, I like him. A lot. And I think he likes me too." The room was silent, the kind of silence that makes your ears ring. Jake set the soda down, his jaw tight, and I braced myself for the worst. "You're serious," he said finally, looking at me. "Riley, you're into my brother?" I nodded, my throat too tight to speak. I wanted to disappear, to rewind the last 24 hours and undo everything. But Ethan's hand found mine under the counter, squeezing gently, and I held on like it was a lifeline. Jake ran a hand through his hair, his expression unreadable. "This is a lot," he said. "You're my best friend, Riley. And you're my brother, Ethan. This is weird as hell." "I know," Ethan said, his voice calm but firm. "But it's real. And I'm not going to pretend it's not." Jake looked at me, and I saw a flicker of hurt in his eyes, but also something else. Understanding, maybe. "You happy?" he asked, his voice quieter now. I swallowed, my heart pounding. "Yeah," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "I think I am." He nodded, slow, like he was processing it. "Okay," he said finally. "Okay. But if you hurt him, Ethan, I'm kicking your ass. Brother or not." Ethan laughed, the sound breaking the tension, and I felt my shoulders relax for the first time all morning. "Fair enough," he said, then looked at me, his eyes warm. "Not planning on it." Jake shook his head, muttering something about needing a nap, and headed upstairs, leaving us alone in the kitchen. I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding, and Ethan pulled me into a hug, his arms strong and steady around me. "Told you we'd figure it out," he murmured, his lips brushing my forehead. I laughed, shaky but real, and buried my face in his chest. "You're insane," I said, but I was smiling, and for the first time, I felt like maybe I could do this. Be with Ethan, face the world, be myself. The storm was over, the sun breaking through the clouds outside, and as Ethan held me, I realized something. I wasn't running anymore. Not from him, not from myself. And that felt like the most meaningful victory of all.